Welcome everyone. I'm C and I'm the Health Literacy Officer here at the Healthcare Consumers Association. And we're here today to talk about making the most of your health appointment. So I'd first like to start with acknowledging the traditional owners of the country that we're on. And for most of us, that'll be the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. So I'd like to pay my respects to them and their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of the city and this region, and pay my respects in particular to their elders past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people attending today. I think that's it. So today we'll be talking about making the most of your health appointment, and I do encourage all of you to jump in if you've got any further questions, pop them in the chat and Darcy will flag me down if I miss them. And we have had a couple beforehand, which I will talk about during the talk. We encourage you to just stay on mute if you're not talking so that there's not too much background noise. And if you can, use the hands up feature. But I'll also just stop at a couple of points so that we can have a bit of a chat, because a lot of the information in this is gathered from people who've attended other talks and our own members of Healthcare Consumers. So it's really good for us to hear from all of you about your info. So I'll just ask people to pop themselves on mute now so we can get started. Okay. All right. So one moment while I share my screen. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Excellent. I'll just make sure I can see you as well. Fantastic. So that's what we're talking about today, making the most of your appointment. So a little bit about the Healthcare Consumers Association. Most of you will be familiar with us, but just for a bit of background, we are the peak body or the kind of systemic advocacy voice for people who use the health system in the ACT. So those, all of us use the health system or have in some way, and we listen to the voices of the organisations that represent different groups, and also those individuals are out there giving feedback to the health system about how they could make it better and listen to our needs. We also do community education like this so people can get more out of the health system and understand it better, because it can be really hard to navigate. So our vision statement there is consumers in control of their own health, and that's what we're all about. So if you learn anything useful today, we really encourage you to join us as a member. It's all free. And we also go out and give these talks to community organisations. So you can let an organisation you might know about us, and we can go and talk to them about this sort of thing as well. As I said, I'm the Health Literacy Officer, so this is a lot of what I do, and Darcy's our Community Liaison Officer who also goes out and does talks, works with diverse communities in particular. So we do quite a bit with different groups around the ACT on these sort of things. Bit of an overview of what we'll talk about today. We're going to talk a bit about preparing for your appointment, think about the types of appointments you might be going to, booking them in so that you can make sure you've got enough time, that sort of thing. Talking about at the appointment, how you might communicate with your doctor best, make sure you're understanding everything, some strategies for working through that, how you can follow up your appointment, what's the best way to do that, what you need to remember, and we'll send out all of these slides so that if there's useful checklists, you'll be able to have all of those. We'll also talk about how to keep a good medical history, because that's a big part of preparing for your appointment. And I'll provide a lot of templates, apps, and tips so that you can build your own medical history and ways of keeping your own medical records, so that as you see different doctors, you've got good notes, good medical records, so it's easier for you to manage your own health information. Okay, so we'll start off with a bit of a video that's tips from our own members, and that's been used to build a lot of this information. So I will start with that. Do let me know if you can't hear this or anything, and I will turn on the captions.
I write everything down if I'm going to attend a doctor, especially a new specialist, maybe that I haven't met before. And I write down everything else as well, so they're aware of I do have other conditions. I'm not just here for heart or lungs or, you know, the relevant diabetes or whatever.
In particular, if you're being given bad news, you may not take in everything the doctor says. You may not ask the right questions, and we all walk out of doctors' surgeries with, I wish I'd asked that. It's also important to take someone with you that you trust. And if you trust them enough, allow them to ask questions on your behalf.
If you're going to be told some information by the doctor, you can actually say, can I record this? And I use my phone when I do that. So I just push the voice memo on there and put it down on the table and say, I just need to think through what you're going to tell me. And so if you're okay, can we just record that? And I find most doctors are happy with you doing that. And if the doctor's not, it's not because it's a wrong question to ask. You should actually say, well, how are you going to provide the information to me? I want it written down then.
Having a list before I go in, because it's usually takes a while to get in to my GP, and so I want to make the most of it. So I have a bit of a list before I go in of the things that I need to address.
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Often the doctors don't have time to go in detail with you, or they may use medical language that you don't understand. It's okay to say, please explain. It's okay to ask dumb questions. And it's important to know your rights and to speak up.
All right. So those were created with our members. So a lot of those members have been with our organization for quite a long time, and they're really experienced. So we've got quite a few of those videos on our YouTube channel, not just about appointments, but about a whole range of issues. So it's worth checking out. And as I say, a lot of the presentation is built on their tips and tricks, as well as my own and ones that I've gathered from other people around the ACT, particularly people with chronic illnesses and a lot of health conditions. So keen to hear your own reflections on the information that we're using, and we'll run through a lot of the information they've given in a bit more depth. So let's get started on preparing for your appointment. So the first thing that we'll talk about is booking your appointment. So one of the things that we need to think about is what kind of appointment is it? So whether it's a GP appointment, a specialist appointment, or maybe an allied health appointment. So allied health would be something like a physiotherapist, even a speech therapist, or even a psychologist maybe. Depending on the kind of appointment, you might prepare a little differently. So say a GP might be a little bit more time poor. So you want to think really carefully about the questions that you ask and how you prioritize them. A specialist, if it's a first appointment, you might get a little long with them, but you might have a lot more history to cover. And allied health, you could have to think about might need to wear more comfortable clothing because they might need to check how I'm moving, those sorts of things, or they might have other therapies they need to do. When we're booking something like a GP appointment, if we've got a first appointment or if you've got 2 or more things to discuss, you might want to think about booking a double appointment. And a lot of the people that I've talked to who have chronic illnesses, and this includes myself, we regularly book double appointments because not only do you get a bit more back from Medicare, but that just makes sure you can cover everything without getting rushed along. And that makes communicating a bit easier. The other thing to think about is if you're a person from a non-English speaking background, or if you say, if you're supporting someone who's using Auslan, I know we don't have anyone who's using Auslan here today, but making sure that you ask for an interpreter. So if it's a language interpreter, you call the translating and interpreting service, or ask the GP specialist medical practitioner's office to do that for you. And that's a free service. Even if you have fairly good English, if you think you need that support, do use that service, because it can make it a lot easier for you to understand if you've got a professional interpreter. And it is a legal obligation for them to provide that for you and organise it at no cost to you. So I do encourage people to do that, and make sure you let people know in your life, if you're supporting them, that they have that right. So,
See, we've just got a question in the chat. Is appointment time standardised across practices?
yeah, so it's supposed to be for GPs at least. So 15 minutes would be a standard appointment and 30 would be a double usually. And that's part of the Medicare rebate items. And similarly, some specialties have fairly standardized appointments, but it can vary depending on the specialty and the allied health professionals. So it's good to look between the different practices if you're, say, choosing between them when you're getting a referral. So once we've booked our appointments, you can then think about how you're preparing. So what questions you need to ask, and I'll go through some tools and tips for that. And think about taking a friend or family member with you. Even if it's a fairly standard appointment, you never know when some results might be a bit much for you. And when we're a bit distressed, or even if we're just more sick than usual, especially those of us with a chronic illness that fluctuates, you're just not taking information in as well as you might. So it's great to have a second set of ears there. So really, even if you don't think you need it, if you can, take a friend or family member just to help you keep track of all the information that's coming in. If it's an appointment where you might need to show the doctor something, or they might need to say, take your blood pressure, really make sure you wear comfortable clothes that you can move easily so that they can check on that. And even things like if they might need to hear your chest, so say you've got asthma and that's something you need to get checked regularly, you need to make sure that they'll be able to access, say, your chest easily with the stethoscope. So the other thing is, if you're getting test results, or even if you're just someone who's had a tough history with medical practitioners in the past, make sure that you're prepared for some of the emotions. It can be a bit stressful going into doctor's appointments. So that's one reason it's good to have a friend or family member with you, but also you can do things like plan out what time of day you have your appointment. So for me, I like to have mine at the start of the day, so that if it's a stressful appointment, I know I'm going to go to work and distract myself, do other things. Some people I've talked to prefer to have them at the end of the day, so that if it's a difficult appointment, it's not going to take away from the rest of their day. So those are things you might think about while you're preparing for your appointment. I'll stop for a second and just see, has anyone else got any tips when they're preparing for their appointments that they use? All good. Feel free to chime in or pop anything in the chat if you think of it. When you're preparing, of course, you'll want to take a few things with you. This is a bit of a core list, and one of the useful things that the Canberra Health website has is a list of stuff to take to appointments with their clinics, and this is sort of adapted from that. So a medical history, and I'll talk about how you can build a good medical summary that's a bit easier than taking a huge folder of all your information. A record of what medicines you're taking, and that includes herbal supplements, vitamins, as well as the ones that you've been prescribed. You want to take your Medicare and concession cards, but we're all forgetful, so I usually make sure I write down my Medicare number on my medical history document, just so I have got it just in case I forget. You also want to take things like your glasses, hearing aids, any sort of assistive technology or items that you might need to check with the doctor or make sure they know that you're using them. And then, of course, you want to take your list of questions or issues that you need to discuss with the doctor. I'll talk a bit about how you can prepare those in a moment. But if you don't have a ready list of questions, there's also some really useful templates that you can use. There's also, it's also important to take a notebook or something to record your appointment with so that you can take notes. And if you're taking a support person, you might also ask them to take notes as well. So I usually, if I'm having a big appointment, will take my mum and say, can you also take notes, and we'll cross check at the end. That's a really useful thing to do. So quickly, and we will come back to this later in a bit more depth, what might go in your medical history, and this will change depending on what information you have, are things like the contacts of your doctors and health providers. So I write down a list, but some people just keep a business card of each of their doctor's offices. Your current health conditions, so I might have a list and say how they're being managed. Is it medication? Is it, you know, do I have a lifestyle plan? Like diet and exercise for something. Past health conditions. So if you've had a big surgery, say you're in an accident and had a knee replacement, making sure that's written down in case there's an issue down the line. Of course, your medication list, any allergies. A lot of people only think of their medication allergies, but it's important to let your doctor know about other ones in case they are related to health issues that come up in future. Family history of big illnesses. So that could be, of course, cancer, heart disease, lung disease, diabetes, any of those big ones that could run in your family. It's good to write them down. Any recent blood testing and imaging results. That could be, because a lot of things are digital, writing down details of where to get them or which doctor has them if you don't have them yourself. But if you can, having a copy available. And if you have one, your advanced care plan, having a copy of that is great. And also the contact details of your enduring power of attorney, if you have one. So once we've got our medical history, the other thing, of course, we want is our list of questions and issues. So I want to show you Question Builder to help you build that list of questions and issues. So I'll just switch windows. Over to this one. So Question Builder is probably one of my favorite tools. It's a bit weird to have a favorite government tool, I know, but it's made by the federal government as part of Health Direct, which is a really useful website. And the Question Builder here is great for helping you come up with a list of questions for any appointment. So I'll just run through how it works so you can see what I mean when I say it's a really useful tool. So say we're going to a GP, it's our usual GP, we've got some new symptoms. So I've selected here, new symptoms, I'm hitting next. And it asks me to select the questions I want to ask. It's got a few different categories. So assessment, and I'm going to select why do I feel like this and what caused these symptoms. It's going to ask me about tests. So I want to know, do I need any tests? How much will they cost? Down in treatment, there's a whole range of different questions I could ask. I think I might ask, do I need treatment? And what are my options? Do I need to see a specialist? And how long will it take to get an appointment? Medicines. Do I need any new medicines? Could this medicine interfere with other ones that I'm taking? Self-management, what can I do to help myself? And follow-up, how will I know if my symptoms are getting worse? What should I do if I'm getting worse? Then I hit next. It then asks you to highlight what questions are most important, which, as we all know, GPs can be really time-pressed. So this is a great step to make sure that you ask the important questions. So you hit the little star next to the questions that are most important. So for me, it might be what caused these symptoms? Do I need any tests? Do I need treatment? What are my options? Do I need new medicines? Those are my big ones. You can also do this optional step around doctor's questions. So if you want to think about what questions the doctor might ask, that can help you think about what information you need to have on hand. So, you know, it's got questions like, can you describe your symptoms? How long have you had the symptoms? How is it impacting your life? It asks about your medical history and what medicines you're taking. A lot of this information you'll have on hand if you've done your medical history. So you might just skip this step and hit finish. And it gives you this little page, which you could take a screenshot of if you're on your phone, for example, but you can also email your questions, and it gives you multiple emails that you can send it to. So you could send it to your support person. I know that some doctors who are a bit tech savvy will let you email it to them, and you can send it to yourself. So if you prefer to have notes on your phone or on, say, an iPad that you use, that's a really useful thing. Or you can print your questions, and printing your questions is useful because it gives you these extra lines under each one. And I know some people who'll print them off and put them in front of the doctor and say, can you write down what you're telling me underneath these? So that means the doctor sees what questions you've got to ask and can give you the information in their words as well. So if that helps you communicate, that can be a really useful thing to do. So that's one way you can prepare for your appointment that might help. Okay. Are there any questions about that one?
No, but that was a really great tip. Thanks, C.
I hope so. It's sincerely one of my favorite tools.
Yeah, very good.
I have asked them to put it in the Health Direct app though, because it's the only thing from their website that isn't in their app.
Uh-huh.
So one of the things that it asks us to do there, of course, is how do we prioritize these questions? So some of the things that I think about are, if I don't get to everything today, how will it affect me? So would I be missing, how would missing this question or this answer affect my quality of life if I don't get to this particular issue? So if I've got a few different health issues that I want to get to, there might be some that are causing me more pain or missing more work, and I want to make sure that I get to those first. Is there a deadline? So if I've got another specialist appointment coming up, I might want to make sure that I answer those questions so I've got them for that appointment. If I've got a particular solution in mind, so I've got an issue with something related to, say, my I've got an issue that might need some physio. I think I need a referral to that. Then I might say to the doctor, I'd like a referral. I'd like some help getting to physio. If I've got that solution in mind, it's a pretty easy answer. So I could put that near the top because it won't take up too much time. But you can also, as we just did, print off that list and share it with the doctor so they can help us prioritize a little bit if that's a time pressure thing. I'd be interested to hear from you all, though, how you might prioritize. Yeah. Jennifer, did you have something? Sorry, you're on mute.
I'm right now. I prioritise things that could be done quickly, like getting a new script and results of blood tests, regular ones, and then got down to the main reason I was there. And I handed the whole list to the GP, and she wrote down answers to a few things. Which was, and that's the first time I've ever done that, and I felt most satisfied with my appointment. Everything was covered.
I'm really glad to hear that strategy works for you.
And she appreciated me making a long appointment too.
Excellent. That's really great feedback. And I've had similar experiences with my GP. It just makes things a bit more efficient, and make sure that we get the answers we really need. So I'm glad to hear that. Fabulous. Has anyone else got anything that works for them? All good. I think the important thing to remember is that you might not get solutions to everything today, and just have a bit of a plan in case you don't. So whether that's booking a follow-up appointment or knowing what can be shuffled down the list if it needs to be. Because that we do know that people are a bit time pressured at the moment in particular. All right. So we've done our prep work pretty thoroughly, and we get to the appointment. So how do we get through that appointment and make sure that we get to everything in and communicate with our doctor well? We've got sort of 5 principles that you can follow and keep in mind to make sure that you're communicating really well with your doctor and getting the best outcome. So the first one is share, and that's sharing your information. So sharing your symptoms, so what's been going on and for how long. Sharing what concerns you have, so what's not normal for you, how is it affecting your life? And that sort of impact thing is really important for doctors understanding what sort of treatments, what sort of procedures are going to work for you and not. Because if you're, say, someone who works outdoors, they give you a medicine that's going to make you more sensitive to sunlight, that's going to be a problem. So you need to talk about your concerns around your condition and how it's impacting your life to make sure that they understand that. Medicines, herbs and vitamins, what's going on with what you're taking, particularly beyond just your prescribed medicines, because they may already have that information. If you're also taking herbal supplements and vitamins, it's important to share the information because there are some that do interact with new prescriptions. And of course, yes, those values and preferences around your work, your life, and what's impacting you. The next one, so share, then ask. So ask if you don't understand. It's important to be honest that I didn't quite understand that. Could you rephrase it in a different way? Could you explain it a little differently? Could you demonstrate how I take this medicine? So for example, I had to learn how to do self-injections for one of mine, and explaining it to me wasn't really helping me because I have to learn by doing things. So the doctor ended up booking an appointment with the nurse to teach me how to do it for the first few. And that was way more helpful than just showing me videos and things like that. It's good to ask for more information. So for example, in the ACT, there's a website that doctors have access to called Health Pathways, where they can download handouts and information about the health system in the ACT that they have access to that we don't, but they can print information from there and share it with you. Some doctors are really good at doing things like circling and highlighting the useful information from those handouts. You can ask them to do that as well. And one of the things you can always ask is, what do I need to do to make sure this doesn't get worse? And that's a useful thing to do. So share and then ask. If you haven't necessarily come in with your list of questions, or it's an urgent appointment, or you just want to make sure that you've got a few core questions to hand, the Ask Me 3 questions are really useful. So these ones are just 3 questions you can ask at any appointment, and they're great if you say, turning up at a walk-in centre, or I like to use them if I've had to have an emergency room appointment. And they are, what is my main problem? What do I need to do? And why is it important for me to do this? So what is my main problem gets us to what's the health issue that we're addressing here? Is it that I've broken my leg? Or is it a sprained ankle? What do I need to do is, well, what's the treatment course that we're doing here? Is it physiotherapy? Is it a medication? Is it just rest? And then why is it important for me to do this? Because the answer might be because it'll get worse if you don't. It could be that this is really urgent. It could be because we need you to go out and get a test so we know what's going on, those sorts of things. So if you ask these 3 questions, you'll know really what's going on for you and what your next steps are, but you'll also get a little bit more context about how urgent it is and whether it's going to affect you more long term. So they're 3 really useful questions to have in your back pocket. I even have them on a card in my wallet. All right. So once we've shared our information, asked what we need to, and made sure we've understood, the next useful thing to do is to repeat back any instructions or advice. And that gets the doctor to check that you've understood. So say they've given you a medication, you say, so I take this 3 times a day with food. And they might say, no, you take 3 tablets once a day with food. And that just means that they have double checked your understanding because you've told them what you've understood from them and they can make sure. So repeat back what they've told you to do and they can check your understanding that way. The next one is to record the main points. So on paper or audio. So you might use your phone to record it if you prefer not to write or you can't write that quickly, or of course get them to write down some instructions. Some other things you can get them to do are get them to put a shared health summary on your My Health record if you use that, which is just a summary document. It's pretty high level, but that means that other doctors, hospitals can access that if needed. And you can always get them to print something like a list of your medicines so you've got an up-to-date one. And then the last one is consider. So consider is considering your options before making a decision about a procedure, a test, or a treatment. And we've got another useful list of questions that you can ask to help you consider your options. And these are the 5 questions from the Choosing Wisely program. So I'll run through these and we'll also send them out so you don't have to remember them all. And these questions are really to make sure that you're not getting too much treatment that might cost too much or could be pretty invasive or could be medicines that interact with your other ones, but also making sure that you're getting the right treatment at the right time, that sort of thing. So the questions are, do I really need this test or procedure? So tests might help you understand what's going on. And procedures might help treat it, but sometimes they're not completely necessary. So it could be that they won't actually change the treatment course. You've got a fairly clear idea of what's going on and the treatment won't change when the test result comes back. The next one is, what are the risks? So there could be risks associated with certain procedures or tests. So say something like a lumbar puncture comes with a fair bit of risk. And you want to ask so that you understand exactly what the risks are of that and whether it's worth it for whatever the illness is that you're trying to treat and understand. Are there any simpler or safer options? Sometimes for some things, you just need to make lifestyle changes. So it could be eating a healthier diet or doing more exercise. And depending on your lifestyle, that could be doable for you. Compared to taking a medication to, say, treat high cholesterol. So you might prefer that. And what happens if you don't do anything? So something like the cold goes away on its own for most people. But if you are immune suppressed, for example, you might need a treatment. Or something like, say, if they suspect it could be cancer, then you do really want to take a test to make sure that it's going to be okay or that you don't need further treatment. And then, of course, what are the costs? Some of these tests, treatments, medications can be quite expensive. Some of them can have emotional costs, so they can have quite a significant impact on your life. And some of them can take quite a lot of time. So it's really important to check. Yeah, and Cody, so I think with pre-existing conditions, it can be important to understand if they're trying to test and treat that or the current symptoms. Yeah, and that's really important. And one of that's one of the things to consider when you're asking these questions, is to think about your pre-existing conditions in light of these questions as well. So could it be my pre-existing conditions, and will this test tell us whether or not it is, might be something that you ask. Okay. Oh, sorry, skipping ahead a bit there. So just to recap, the questions that we're asking during those appointments are around the share, ask, repeat, and consider sort of framework. That's what we're doing in those appointments. Okay, and I've talked a fair bit about taking notes. So here's a template that I use and a few other people use similar ones. And I will share this template as a sort of Word document so you can change it so that it works for you. And it basically lets us write down when we're seeing someone, which practitioner it is, which priority questions we have, what questions we've got to ask. And I've also got a box there to say what my medications are, and even a little tick to say I haven't got any to change, any test results I have, and then space to take notes about my key issues and what actions I'm taking and the doctor's taking, with some check boxes. And this is just a strategy that I've found works for keeping track of who needs to do what after my appointments, but also taking notes in appointments really quickly, because sometimes there's a bit of time pressure there. I know there's a few similar templates floating around, but this is one that works for me. And I'd be really keen to hear if other people have templates or similar ways of taking notes. I know my mother takes notes in a similar way, but a much more longhand sort of way. So does anyone else take notes like this or in a similar sort of way, or a completely different one? Right. If you do come across any other templates, we'd love to hear about them. I never take notes, I just get lost and frustrated. I certainly did for a really long time, until I sat down and tried to put some structure around it. And this has been refined over a long time, and with advice from a few other people with chronic illnesses. So I'm very much keen to hear from anyone else who uses this or a similar template.
Yeah, similar things, notes, giving cheat codes. Yeah, I definitely, if I forget to bring something like this, I will always just pull up my notes app in my phone and just make sure I'm writing things as I go along. But I think this template is much better than that if we can remember to bring it.
Well, one of the things that I've also ended up doing, because myself and a few other people that I've worked with have poor memory, is, and I'll share this as a Word document, is putting it in OneNote, which is a note-taking software that you can have on your phone. And that way you can use it like Notes app. So I'll share it as a Word document so you can copy and paste it into whatever software you might use on your phone, if that's the way you want to do it, or print it out and keep it on paper. All right. So if we've taken our notes, we've got those sorts of things, hopefully it'll be a lot easier to do this sort of follow-up. But I do want to talk a bit about what we do after our visit. So after our visit, the first thing we want to think about is things like tests. When do we need to get them? Where do we get the results from? When do we get those results back? So that might be different for different tests. For example, blood test results usually go directly to your doctor. But sometimes things like medical imaging, ultrasounds, we might need to chase up ourselves, especially depending on where we go. So it's really important to think about when and who we need to get those results from. Making other appointments. So if you're having an appointment with your doctor as a follow-up, that might impact when you need to go get your tests, so you make sure the timing's right. Or you might want to hold off on booking those other appointments depending on when you can get your tests. Of course, this might seem a bit obvious, but if you've agreed to a certain treatment course, you might want to make sure that you take your medication, treatments and exercise. You do want to make sure you do that so that you can see if it works for you. And one of the useful things to do there is make sure you've asked that question, what do I do if this doesn't work? You can, of course, ask your chemist to put any new information about your medicines in your My Health record if you've forgotten to do that in your doctor's appointment. I just like to mention that because we do forget. And make sure you record what happens. So if your treatment is working for you, or if not, recording what happens will help us see that. I'll talk about some apps later that help you track your symptoms, but you might use a health diary, and some doctors even have templates, especially specialists. They might give you a template to track how things are going. And there's a bit of note-taking capacity in My Health record if you use that. If you've got any concerns after your appointment, it's important to ask where to go after hours. If it's particularly specialists, might have somewhere they prefer you to contact. Or if it's your GP, you want to have the contact details of things like the Canberra After Hours Local Medical Service, and we can make sure you've got that, or the after hours doctors, so that you can get support for your conditions after that, especially if you're trialing new medications, that sort of thing. And make sure you do phone back if you have any more questions. A lot of people assume they can't call the doctor's office if they have any questions after an appointment, but it's really important to do so, particularly if you're starting a new test or treatment, because the doctor might have certain things in mind that if you call back and say, I'm having this reaction, they might go, well, that's urgent. You do need to come in and see me. So do make sure you call back if something changes. The other thing is, we did have a question about giving complaints and feedback. So if you're not happy with your appointment, we do have a complaints guide, which we'll share in the email after this. It's important to give feedback to the doctor's office in the first instance, but then you can escalate that if you need to. It is always okay to give feedback, and it's in fact our right under the Australian Charter of Medical Rights. So we'll share a bit of information about that in the follow-up email, because there's a fair bit of detail there, but we have a guide to making complaints that we'll share. I did mention a bit there, things about My Health record, so I'll just quickly cover off what that is. The My Health record is a federal Australian government high-level medical record. So it holds medical summaries, which are really just what people have been diagnosed with, and some information about some treatments, a little bit about your test results if you've consented to that, and you can opt out of it if you wish to. It is connected to your MyGov account and can be connected to the Medicare and Health Direct apps if you use those. And it allows doctors anywhere in Australia, if you consent, to find your medical history at a glance if they need to. It's important because people do have security concerns about to say you can opt out, and you may have already. But it is a useful thing to access if you have a lot of conditions or if you're traveling interstate, because you can get your GP to upload a health summary. So if you go to a hospital interstate, they can see all that information. So just making sure that people know about that. And we'll include links so you can find out more about it. This one is a new one, the digital health record, which comes from ACT Health. And it's the ACT government's new system. It launched on the 12th of November, so it is very new. And it's a more detailed version. So it's for anyone accessing ACT Health Services, your records that they've kept across all the different health services they're trying to bring together. And doctors across the ACT Health Services will be able to check your medical history with them so that they can see your records. The idea is that you won't have to tell your story and your medical history to every new medical professional. And it has more detailed health summaries and test results from your time in the ACT Health system. It's used for everyone across the ACT public health system, and you can use an app called MyDHR to access your own records, see what's in there, so you've got a bit more control over your records. It is currently being implemented, so there's a little bit of teething problems, is probably the best way to put it, but you can find out more information and get tech support if you are trying to access your health record at the link that Darcy's just posted. And ultimately, it is aimed at making our health experience a bit better. The key thing to remember about these sort of records is that they don't necessarily replace us keeping our own records and our own notes to support us. They won't contain everything. They won't contain the conversation that you have with your doctor and necessarily all the questions that they answer. So we'll try to provide ways for you to keep your own records alongside these. I do want to just stop and see if anyone's got any questions, particularly around those digital health records. No, all good.
Yes, I do. Sorry.
Oh.
Oh, damn, now I've forgotten what the question is. Bear with me 2 seconds. Yes, will the records be retrospective? Or will our records history start from the 12th of November?
So it is retrospective. The ACT Digital Health Record, it does, because it's replacing the existing record system to unite them. So if you go and look in MyDHR, for example, I can see like my previous COVID tests, for example. So it's worth having a look and seeing what's in there. As I said, there's a bit more information at that link about what's there.
Okay then, thank you.
Okay, all right. Oh. So those are the government health records, and now we'll talk a bit about recording your own health information. So the first question that people often come to with recording their own health information is, do I want it digitally? Because so many things are going digital these days, or do I want it on paper? Especially because a lot of people have their medical records, their medical tests going back years and years on paper. So we've come up with a bit of a list of pros and cons from talking with each other. And we've got, on the digital side of things, we're talking about being easy to access. So I spoke earlier about having things in OneNote, which is a note-taking software. You might be able to send things to your health professional by email, which can be useful. It's easy to carry lots of documents if they're digitized. And some services sync with your, say, your chemist. They might use an app to manage scripts, or using My Health Record, if that's what, if you choose to use that. On the other hand, paper has some pros as well. It's secure, it can't be hacked, which a lot of people have concerns about. You don't need much tech knowledge to set it up, and there's fewer compatibility issues with paper. So paper doesn't really, you don't have to move between systems with paper. But on the cons, both of them do have cons. So for digital, you might be worried about security, particularly with some of the hacks that have happened recently. Some of the apps do keep data overseas, though any app that's based in Australia has to follow the Australian privacy standards. And you might need some technical know-how to set them up. I'll try and demystify a few of them, but that can be a bit of a barrier to people. For paper, there's no backup for a lot of these unless you take photocopies of everything, which for those of us with big medical records, that could be quite a lot. It's much harder to share them, and you can't search them as easily. So if you digitize your records, you might be able to search them a lot more easily. And big medical records can take up a lot of space, particularly if you've got a lifetime of chronic illness, you might have quite a big one. I tend to take a bit of a best of both worlds approach, and I'll talk a bit more about this. One of the things that can help us is thinking about how you keep all of this information and what works for you in your mind. What helps you remember it? What will help you keep it up to date? So you remember this slide from earlier. We're thinking about things like the contacts of your other doctors and health providers. Do you keep that in your phone digitally, or do you have it written down? What about your current health conditions? How is it easiest for you to update that information, keep all that information? Your past health conditions and operations, is it easy for you to keep track of all the information digitally? Your medications. Do you use a medication app? Would it be easy for you to use a medication app, or do you prefer to have a paper list? Things like your allergies, how do you keep that information? Your family history of major illnesses, how have you assembled that information? Have you? And if you haven't already, then that might mean that it's easy for you to adapt that to whatever new system you decide to use. For your blood test and imaging results, if you're getting those emailed to you, then that could be easy enough. But if they're getting mailed to you or you have to ask for paper copies, then you might need to think about that. And similar with your advanced care plan, a lot of those are on paper, so you need to think about scanning them in, making sure they're up to date. But also, they're now being uploaded to things like My Health Record and the Digital Health Record, so you know that there'll be a copy digitally. So you could keep these as a physical list or folder, but because there's so many documents, there's not always an easy template. So I'll run through a few different ones that might work for you, that you can work into your own solution. Some of the templates and resources that people do use are things like the health diaries. Some of you might have seen the Australian Women's Health Diary, and some people I know use that to keep their medical summary, because those front few pages contain a lot of that information or space for it, and have reminders of screening tests. So for women, that can be a really useful one. I'll also show you one tool, or one blogger that I came across has created a one-page medical history similar to the one that I've been using. And I will send out this link because this, I won't show you the whole blog post, but this blogger has created, and she's based in the US, is about creating a medical history. And I'll just scroll down to some of the images, but she's got a few different sections where she explains the shorthand used by doctors. So medical history, diagnosis, that sort of thing, how you might make things a little bit shorter. I'll just zoom in, and how she sets it out in a table so it's really short and can all fit on one page. So I'll share this blog post, but that's one way that she does it, so that she can have all her medical history on one page. I think she also includes, if I scroll through, yeah, her medication and other treatments and who provides it. Apologies. I know that she also includes information about how to track your family's medical history, which is really useful. The other one, which is the next one on that dot point list, I'll just switch over, is from the Western Australian Health Department, which is a family health tree. If you haven't done a rough history of your family, your medical history, this little family tree is quite a useful thing to do. Print it off and draw on it, or you can fill it in digitally. It's got a little shorthand key for things like heart disease, cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure. So that makes it a little easy to fit in all that information. And that way you can track a few of your relatives and make sure that you've got that information in an easy way, rather than trying to write it all down in a whole new format. Someone else has already done it for you. Yet another cheat code, as Cody put it earlier. And the next one that I had on that slide was for if any of you, sorry, no, not that one. If any of you are carers of a person with disability, particularly an intellectual disability or cognitive impairment, working with someone, then the Queensland government has created this thing called a health passport. And we're hoping to get version for the ACT as well, but you might find this useful to adapt for your use. They've got information in here, which is things that you need to, you must know about me, things that are useful to know about me, and my likes and dislikes. The things that you need to know about me are a lot about medical history information. So all your personal information, who you live with and contact people, but also your health documents, so advanced care plans, who their doctors are, allergies and adverse reactions, those sorts of things. But if we keep going, it'll say about cultural backgrounds, spiritual beliefs and languages, which might be difficult to communicate. And whether they usually communicate verbally, what might help them communicate, what helps them understand, what sort of behaviours are normal for them, what makes them anxious, how to know they're in pain, those sorts of things. And then the other sections tell them more useful information. So things about their what sort of disabilities they might have, what sort of supports are required. So there are more templates for people who have different sorts of conditions. And I'll just switch back to our presentation. Okay. So I'll provide links to all of those tools, but those are the sorts of templates you might find useful in making your medical history or supporting someone else. Has anyone got any questions about what I've just showed you?
Not necessarily about what you've just showed, but who exactly will get access to that? Because it's not because it is compulsory if you access an ACT or Canberra Public Health Service, but who exactly would get? Are
you referring to the digital health record?
Yes, sorry, yes.
Sorry.
Am I backtracking a little bit too much, or?
The digital health record, everyone who uses the ACT health system will be using, recorded in that. It's part of, the ACT government is legislated to keep health records. The optional bit is whether you use the MyDHR app. If you want to talk more about this, I can get in touch with you afterwards. And we are collecting a bit of feedback as well and providing it to the government.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Okay. So from this, I've adapted a template from some of the templates we've just seen, but also from the one that I use to keep track of just a summary of my health information. And again, I'll share this, I'll share it in a Word format so that you can adapt to whatever platform you choose to use or print it out. And what I've got here is just so that you can keep your records. You might print it and give it to your doctor. As I say, I keep a lot of my records in OneNote and then print them as they're needed. So things like just your name and details, because as I say, I might print it. I do keep my Medicare and my health insurance number on there just in case I forget my cards. But I've got things like my medical history, the condition, so what's been diagnosed, a little bit about the history. So it might be whether it's stable, how it's being treated, and which doctor is treating it. I've got things like allergies, so saying how severe it is, where the action plan is, and maybe just briefly what it is. Medications, it's just a summary of my medication list. Family history, which again is brief and just add more boxes as I need them. And some other notes. So preferences about care, any recent screening tests. So I put my previous, my last eye test in there, my, any things like if you get cervical screening tests, when was your last one? So you can remember all of those and where my advanced care plan might be. And then on the second page, so it's a double-sided page, that's where I keep all the details of my medical professionals, so my general practitioner, specialists, etc. And I'll just switch to show you an example one we've created. If I can close some of these tabs and get to it. Okay, so this is just a mock-up that I've done. So got all their personal details, but as you can see, we've got medical history, we've got asthma, diagnosed at 6 and stable with medication and being treated by Dr. Smith. This is assuming that I've got Dr. Smith's details on the other side. Hypertension was diagnosed in 2018, improving with medication and exercise and treated by Dr. Perdue. And knee surgery from a car crash in 2010 with a reconstruction and not currently being treated by a particular doctor, that sort of thing. Again, with the allergies one, dust mites, it's a mild allergy, and I take antihistamines if it's around a lot of dust. So there's that one. And then, so for the medications, I've got the prescribed ones, but also, my supplement, which is a Ferrograd C for iron. Family history, talking about dad with who had a heart attack and lung cancer, mum who's had asthma since childhood, bit about who to contact about my advanced care plan, which would be my sister, when my last eye test was, and then on the back, all my other medical practitioners, so GP, specialist, dentist, and preferred pharmacy, so that I've got the details for where to send my scripts if I prefer them to just send them on. So I'll send out that template if it's useful to you. I hope it might be. And that could be used on paper or adapted to be used digitally. Are there any questions about that template or other ones that you might use?
I think I have a question actually.
Yeah.
Because a lot of this seems to be considering as though there's already a continuity of care. Like, I guess, like, how do you reestablish this stuff when you've dropped off the wagon and you haven't had a regular GP in 5 years? You're not getting treated for various problems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How do you build back up from scratch?
So that could be a difficult one. I mean, if you're filling this out, for example, so mine, for example, where there are illnesses that haven't currently got a specialist, I do leave it blank to say there is no current treating professional, so that I can raise that as an issue. For example, if I'm seeking a new referral, where you are looking for a new GP, that can be quite difficult, but it's still valuable to fill in this medical history as much as you can, though you might not have doctor's details to fill in. Yeah.
So it's put in what you can and then just build from there.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you can build it iteratively. That's why I've included a date spot on there so that you can say this is current as of this point. And you can build it as you say, find a new specialist for this condition and add to it. And that should help you track your progress as you get better continuity of care, hopefully.
Fantastic, thank you.
All right. So I've shown you a few templates, and the aim is not to overwhelm you and not to say that you'll use all of them, but to emphasize that it's really about what's going to work for you, because whilst the digital health records are standardized and a lot of practices use a fairly standard format, these ones are our records and they're for us to use. So it's about what works for you. So my favorite example of this is these medication lists. We've got one here, which is medications I need to take, and it's got different times of day, the name of the medication, what it's for, instructions, and somewhere to keep notes. But this is the exact same information made by the exact same people, just flipped. So it's still got the same name, what it's for, instructions, and then when you take it, but it's flipped around because some people might prefer it that way. It might click in their brains a little bit differently. So I really encourage you to change these, tweak them for your own uses, and find one that works for you. I'm, again, really keen to hear if there are particular ones that you've found or issues you can foresee with any of these templates that you have questions about. As Cody just pointed out, that if you haven't got an established continuity of care of team of doctors, then you might have blank spots, and that's okay. You can adapt these so that they work for you as things currently are. So are there any particular questions about these templates or ideas that you have now that you're thinking about building your own? A question in the chat: should doctors charge you when you change doctors? That one's it depends what they're charging you for. If it's just because you're changing doctors, no. If they are charging you to get your medical records, that depends. There is a set maximum fee that they can charge for the administration in terms of giving you your records or transferring them, and that's set by the ACT government, and I can send through this year's set fees, and there's also a financial hardship clause in that legislation so that they can't overcharge people who are in hardship. So we can make sure that we send that out with the follow-up email on this, because sometimes people do overcharge, and then if that happens, you can make a complaint to the ACT Health Services Commissioner, who manages all complaints about health records. So I can make sure that that information goes out as well. Were there any other questions at this point? All good. So those are a few of the templates. As I say, a lot of them can be adapted to be digital or paper, depending on what you want. One strategy that really works for people a lot of the time is to do a bit of best of both worlds, which is when you get paper notes or a letter, you can scan those in to your digital records if you like to have them using an app. Things like, some of them would be Microsoft Lens, or if you use Google Drive, that has an inbuilt scanner that detects that it's a page and scans it for you. So you might be able to use something like that to put your paper records into the digital world so that everything's in one place. You might also use your own online storage if you're concerned about security. So I use Microsoft OneDrive and use some two-factor authentication. If you're not familiar with that, it means that if someone tries to log in, it sends me a text with a code, and I have to add that in as well as my password to log in. So that gives me an extra layer of security, and knowing that someone's really got to be trying to get into my medical information. If you're going digital, you might also want to try some apps that can make it easier and a bit more user-friendly to manage some things. So there's some really good ones for managing your medications that I'll talk about in a moment. MedicineWise and MedAdvisor are two. There's also ones for tracking symptoms, which is really good if you're following up because you've had a new treatment or you're trialing a different lifestyle change. And MyTherapy and FlareDown are two that I've tried. FlareDown in particular has been quite useful. Another app that some people have found useful is Otter.ai, which can transcribe recordings, though more and more phones can, when you take a recording, write them out for you in written form. So that means that you can search through the text. And I've mentioned a couple of times using OneNote, which is from Microsoft, which makes a little virtual notebook. So I name my notes the date and the medical practitioner I've seen. So if I search for that practitioner, it'll come up with all the appointments and the notes that I've had with that person. Evernote is another one that does a similar thing. But you can do the same with Word documents in a folder or even PDFs, depending on what you're familiar with using. My main tip about using apps is to use is to check the privacy policy because some of them aren't based in Australia, and so they might share your data with third parties. So if you're not comfortable with that, that's something to think about. It's also important to, if you can, use Australian apps because they're protected by our data privacy laws. The things like Flare Down, for example, might work with researchers so that if they can look at patterns over time, it can help with the research about certain diseases. But that's something you need to consent to. So it's really important if you're using apps to check that. And just any other apps that people have used or would recommend? In particular, there's a lot of condition-specific apps out there. So interested to hear if there's any that people are particularly fond of. Not hearing any questions there. Just a quick word on those medicine apps and what they do. We do give a whole talk on managing your medicines, and I go into a bit more depth about these and how to use them in that talk. And the medicine apps that are out there, most of them do these things. MedAdvisor is one of them. I've got a picture of it there. They keep a list of the medicines that you use, including what the medicines are for usually, how much you take and when and how to use it. And a lot of them can set reminders for you, which is really useful for a lot of them. You can track medicines for someone you care for in most of them. So they'll have a carer mode, which is really helpful if you're managing medicines for yourself and other people. And some of the pharmacies around Canberra have started using apps so you can order your repeats and manage your scripts in them. So for example, I mentioned MedAdvisor because Capital Chemist uses it, which a lot of people use that in Canberra, which means that if you use eScripts or your doctor sends your script to your chemist, they can make it pop up in your account in that so that you can order your scripts from the app and then go pick them up or even get them delivered. So that's one thing that could be very useful for people. One of the things that can be really useful about MedAdvisor is it tells you how many days left you've got on your scripts, which for those of us who aren't very good with memory can be a useful thing. I did mention earlier about symptom trackers. Symptom trackers, they can be pretty variable, and there are some out there specifically for certain types of chronic illness. So I've got a couple of more general examples here. Kathy just said Priceline's got one as well. Oh, Joplin, an encrypted notes app might be better for keeping health notes. Thank you, Cody. That's a good one. So that's another one for folks if they're interested in encrypted notes. Some apps that I've looked at in the past for tracking symptoms include, this one, Flare Down. And Flare Down tracks symptoms and it does collaborate with researchers, but you do have to consent to that. Or you can consent to that or not. And it tracks things like what treatments you've taken, if you've been exposed to any sort of things that might trigger you. So for me, I was tracking things like the weather, because that sets off my arthritis. And you can use that to work out what's might be setting off your symptoms, or if you're starting a new medication, if you've been taking that medication, it might show you a graph of how your symptoms have been going over time. The useful thing about this is if your doctor's been asking you to keep track of your symptoms, it can print off reports for you, or even email them to your doctor for you, so that you don't necessarily have to write it all down by hand, which could be a lot of extra admin. So it can show your doctor how your symptoms are changing over time, if something is working for you or not, and that can really help you manage some of those treatments. It can also help you track how behavior, diet, those sorts of things are helping or hindering your progress. One of the other ones you might try is MyTherapy, which is similar to Flare Down, but I think it does also have things like medication reminders in it. Are there any other symptom trackers people have used, particularly for specific conditions? All right. So it's important to remember with using these apps that you don't have to. It's just something that you might try, and it's part of sort of a complete way of building that medical history and medical record. So you don't have to do it all at once. You can do it component by component. So I'll send out the slides and the information so that you can just try these as they work for you. And all of these are part of all these different things that you can do to understand your health better. And this is from the Australian Commission for Safety and Quality in Healthcare. It's all about things like making sure you give all your medical details, keeping track of your information, asking for more information, educating yourself, and making sure you're prepared for your appointments. So these are all other things that you can do, as well as having good notes, good medical records to understand your health better. So I'd just like to end on this slide because there's lots that you can do to make sure that you're getting the most out of the health system. And this is just one component. So if anyone has any further questions today, if I've forgotten anything, you can get in touch with me directly, send me an email, or get in touch with our office. We have more resources on our website, and I'll be putting a lot of the ones from today on there. And we will be doing more talks. You can join us as a member for free, and we do have a short feedback survey. This is a kind of new presentation, so really keen to get more feedback, especially about new information we might include or change.